Hi, I'm Max Walker&Williams, and today I've travelled to Amsterdam to be here at the Bitcoin conference to interview a couple of Bitcoin maxis and to learn as much as I possibly can from the source about Bitcoin. Let's go. Hi, I'm Max Walker&Williams, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being with Katie Ananina, better known as Katie the Russian. She's a social media influencer with over 69,000 followers on Twitter alone. She's a businesswoman, and she's the founder of planbpassport.com. Katie, thanks ever so much for taking some time.
My pleasure.
To have a quick chat with me. So how are you finding the Bitcoin conference here in Amsterdam?
I'm absolutely loving it. That's my fourth conference produced by Bitcoin Magazine. So wow. I know they're always doing it at a high standard, high quality. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be speaking.
Yeah, okay. And so what are your topics? What are you speaking about?
So my company is built on the philosophy of jurisdictional arbitrage and flag theory and achieving freedom through stacking flags, as we say, meaning obtaining citizenship and residencies all around the world for your benefit in order to obtain more freedom or just hedge against your current government. And on main stage tomorrow, we'll be speaking about exactly that. How do we bring the capitalistic environment towards the governments, towards nation states, and how do we make them compete for our wealth and fruits of our labor now, again, instead of just having a monopoly over us?
That's so interesting. And so can you just explain the process of what planbpassport.com does? So what is, the multi-flag theory and what's the process?
Yeah, at Plan B Passport, we define flag theory as the way to limit your dependency on any one particular state by obtaining flags from different jurisdictions. And that's exactly what we're helping our clients to do. We help Bitcoiners all around the world to get second citizenship or a residency in the jurisdiction that is beneficial for them specifically.
Okay, and how do you do that? So in practical terms, I go on the website, and then what's the process? How do I achieve that?
I like to say that, hey, I'm Katie and I sell passports, and people immediately think that it's something illegal. But actually what it is simply following nations' immigration policies in order to take advantage of it. We are focused on citizenship by investment. That's our main focus, I'd say. And in this scenario, it's basically a pure capitalistic transaction. You either donate into nation's economy or you purchase real estate in the country. And on this basis, you obtain a citizenship, a passport from this country. Not all the countries have this program, but the Caribbean islands that we work with, such as St. Kitts, Antigua, Grenada, Dominica, or St. Lucia, that's what we work with a lot. That would be one program. And the way it works is, again, you just put together your case, your paperwork, and you apply for citizenship by investment based on, let's say, donation. So $100,000 or $150,000, depending on the jurisdiction and your family count, is a donation into Sustainable Growth Fund or a national economy. And that's just the part of the immigration policy that countries want.
So effectively you invest in the country and they invest in you and they allow you to be a member of that country. And I guess the money goes towards good things too. You've just touched on there, the society at large, green spaces and that sort of thing. So in theory then it's a pretty win-win situation, both for the person looking to get the second passport and for the country receiving the donation.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay. What are the other benefits? So I've done that, and that's great. So I'm a British passport, I'm a British passport holder, and I've got a passport that you've facilitated for me. What are the benefits? What are the real world utilities, if you like, of that?
Depending on your needs and goals, that will change. For example, if somebody is going for a lower tax regime, or they want to make sure they don't pay capital gains tax on their Bitcoin, They just need to change the tax residency and the jurisdiction where they are a tax resident of. So those countries that I mentioned, such as Caribbean islands, they have zero capital gains tax, zero global income tax, zero inheritance tax, zero dividends tax. So all those things are pretty damn attractive.
Yeah.
Now, again, depending on your goals and needs, let's say you were born in a country like mine. I was born and raised in Russia, and the passport of Russia right now is an absolute dog shit.
Yeah.
Like, we are hated everywhere in the world. I cannot travel with my Russian passport. I cannot get into the EU. I cannot get to the United States. But because I'm very well hedged against that and I took care of my flags beforehand, I now can be here now at this conference.
You're
right?
here at this conference, so it's living proof that it works.
Exactly. And in most scenarios, the most important reason why people get those passports is having a plan B, hedging against their own government, because you're born in a non-conceptual monopoly. Your government has full power over you, and you can't really go ahead and switch for another service provider, because that's what government is. We sometimes forget that they are the service provider for the people, but try to go and change your service provider. It's not that easy.
Or disagree with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now you have a second passport. You have way more freedom, because if something happens in your home country, if your own government is after you, or after your Bitcoin, or after your business, you just say,
see you later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why we call it F*** you passport. Just like Bitcoin is F*** you money, we sell F*** you passports.
Okay. Are there any downsides? Are there any? So, have you ever had a problem where you're not caught, but you stop with two passports? And I think a lot of people misunderstand the way that they believe that passports, you can only have one per person in the world, but that isn't true. So you can perfectly legally be a citizen of two different places, and so you're just carrying identity cards of those two different places.
Exactly.
But are there any downsides to it that you've come across or you found?
So some people will question you because it's unusual, as you said, and you just have to be strategic about it. When you get to, let's say, a border, and you go through TSA or any airport, you don't just draw up your 8 passports like, oh, I'm Jason Bourne. No. So you just have to, again, strategize for it, because your different passports have different power, right? For example, one of them will get you into the EU easily, another one will get you to the US, another one will get you to China or India, and you have to strategize which passport you're going to use for a particular travel.
Right, okay.
So there is no downside per se, but some people will just find it a little weird and maybe will think it's illegal, which it's absolutely not.
Of course. That's so interesting, because it's a bit like anything else. Money, you just need to learn the rules of the game, and then you can play by those rules and win. But you've got to have you've got to have the understanding and the knowledge to play the game. It's
quite a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I bet. How did this come about? How did you tell us your story?
So I'm an immigrant myself. I was born and raised in Russia, and only 7 years ago I moved to the United States.
Wow.
Throughout my immigration process, I realized that having a second passport or second residency or simply driver license really benefits me in some ways. I'll get pulled over somewhere and I'll be like, okay, which passport should I use, or which driver license should I use? Like, my dad will get pulled over in Russia and be like, here's American driver license, and they're like, oh my god, never seen one, what do we do?
Yeah, they don't know how to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So through my own experience, I found this concept of flag theory, and then I was like, there must be something more to that. It's not just using different driver licenses with cops. It must be bigger than that.
Yeah.
And I started doing my research, and I realized there's this whole rabbit hole, the whole industry. And over 3 years ago, I started Plan B Passport, and I've been helping Bitcoiners ever since. And I'm like a niche business in a niche community.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Very niche thing.
So I think I watched an interview with you where you said that you kind of were advised by a Russian friend or customer that he was asking you about Bitcoin and all that sort of thing, and it was through that
it came to I met this friend, Russian-speaking friend in Miami, and he already was working in the industry of citizenship by investment, but he didn't really understand Bitcoin, and a lot of clients were coming to him and saying, can I pay with Bitcoin?
Yeah.
What is this thing?
Yeah.
And he's a true libertarian at core, so I was like, let me tell you about that. So he is now very sold.
He's now
on
a convert.
That. Yeah, for sure. Very orange pilled.
Good for you. So thinking about it, if everybody in the world were to come to you and say, we want your passport and we want to pay in Bitcoin, and the whole thing became decentralized, is that the utopia that we think it would be? Or could it be a dystopia where if nobody pays any taxes...
I don't believe that taxes is actually...
Can society function?
Yeah.
Society
can definitely function without a centralized way to collect taxes. I barely use government services in a way that other people do. I don't believe that public medical system is good. I think it's very much paid for by big pharma. I don't think that educational system that is available for public through taxes is good, because that's a propaganda school. And basically all those services, because they're so centralized and paid by the same agency, of course they impose their values on you. And I don't think that's the way free thinkers are born. So I believe that there are much better societal structures that are coming to us, and Bitcoin was the very first and very important piece of it. Again, fix the money, fix the world. Bitcoin enables us to save money outside of government, to move money outside of government control, and to basically take power back from the nation states and the governments. So I believe that on this better societal, Bitcoin is the truth, the first layer upon which we'll build the better societal structures. And again, jurisdictional arbitrage on top of it basically enables us to switch the service provider to another government. And now, again, we make the government, and now we make other jurisdictions to compete for us, for our wealth and fruits of our labor, instead of us being born into monopoly. So if, let's say, Britain now bans Bitcoin, which is you can't ban Bitcoin, you can only ban yourself from the Bitcoin network. So if Great Britain bans Bitcoin, all the Bitcoiners move out of there, and now they pick another jurisdiction that is more beneficial for them, that allows them to do this whole thing of freedom money. And who loses? Not the Bitcoiners. The Great Britain is going to lose, because all the wealth is going to move away. So now they must provide you with the service you want at the price you agree, because otherwise you will take your money elsewhere.
So effectively then, you believe that if the public sector becomes free market capitalism, basically, that if you provide a good service at a good price, then you get customers.
Exactly.
And if you're too expensive or the service isn't any good, then you don't.
Yeah.
And you think that's, and I actually tend to agree with that completely.
Follow the money. Always follow the money.
You touched on there. If I was being cynical, I would say that this, your business and your offering, with respect, is a way for the 1%, the 1% of the 1%, the fat cats, the rich people at the top, to avoid paying their fair share in tax. And actually, most people who are probably more vulnerable and most at risk at being controlled by their government aren't able to, don't even know about it, and even if they did, they can't access the system. What do you say to people who
it used to be the case, definitely. When jurisdictional arbitrage as an industry was born, it was mostly about asset protection. People wanted to move their asset outside of their government control, but now we have a better asset protection mechanism, which is Bitcoin. And even if you have $5 in your wallet, that this $5 are outside of your government control. So the whole asset protection thing has been solved with Bitcoin. So now we only have to basically follow the freedom, and there are many more ways outside of citizenship by investment to get there. For example, right now we are really expanding our offerings, not without just $150,000 checks. We just started a very popular bear market product, which is a residency of Mexico.
Right.
People really love living there. It's a low cost of living, high quality of life, perfect weather, and a lot of salsa and bachata, which I really love. I lived in Mexico myself for a couple of years. So it's a $5,000 product. All you have to prove that you have a salary outside of Mexico over $2,700 a month. And again, we're not talking about crazy wealth here. No. We're just talking about somebody having a remote job. And on this basis, they can move to Mexico and obtain a residency permit. Now, I always talk about other ways that are cheaper and more accessible for people. For example, anchor baby or birth tourism. You go have a baby in the country, the baby gets dual citizenship, yours and the country the baby was born in. Yes. Again, not all the jurisdictions, but some provide that. Now, on this basis, parents can obtain residency permit, and then 5 years later, they can get a passport too. So that's been becoming very popular. Another way, that's how I personally moved to the United States, is a skill-based immigration. You basically prove that you have extraordinary ability of some sort, and the country actually wants you there because, again, you're bringing your skills to them, and they can use it.
What was your extraordinary skill?
I was a professional sailor.
You're right. Okay. Yeah.
Hence the question.
Yeah. So I'm lower middle class. I'm on a good wage, but nothing amazing. And my children are already born, and I can't have any more, or I don't want to have any more. What would you recommend to somebody who can't afford? I know you've mentioned the Mexico 5,000. What other piece of advice would you give, other than buying? I mean, from a Plan B point of view, rather than the Plan B passport, rather than a Bitcoin, because, like you said, $5 you can buy Bitcoin. Done.
Yeah.
Are there anything else that somebody could do who is looking to take back some of the control that their government might have over them?
Definitely. With Bitcoins, there are so many rabbit holes that come with it. For example, I really got into personal health, functional medicine, again, to not be dependent on what government-funded medical system tells you, because I don't think they actually want the best for you. I don't think they actually care that much. They optimize for the sickest, and now if you're above the average health, they're not going to really help you.
Yeah.
So I would say go into that rabbit hole. Educational system, again, it's a lot of propaganda and not really all that great education. I don't believe that you have to sit in a government-funded school for 30 hours a week in order to learn simple math, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are so many better ways to learn math, geometry, history that is not come with propaganda. So I'm really into homeschooling and unschooling, and I just had my first child, which I'm very happy about. It's the whole another rabbit hole, and I'm also kind of against the whole feminism agenda that makes women believe that their achievements in business, their achievements at work are more valuable than becoming a mother. And again, I just think that taxing 2 people is better for the government than taxing 1. Yeah. So stay-at-home moms are no longer in fashion, which I don't think that's cool. I think staying with kids is the coolest thing you can do. So just question authority. That's my biggest advice. Question where the authority came from. Did you really choose to do that? Did you opt in, or were you born into this setting? And just start questioning why. Kids, they always ask why. You tell them, oh, you can't do that. And they say, why?
Right, yeah.
So, you can't do this. Ask why, and then try to understand who benefits from that. Does the government benefit, or is it actually for your own good?
That's really good advice, and I'd say I'd probably add to that you should never accept any one thing as the truth. Always look into stuff and research, and be open to being wrong as well, which is, I think, is very, very important. How do you see, because obviously at the moment the whole world seems to be in turmoil, with the war and the invasion of the Ukraine, and the fuel crisis in France, and inflation and deflation and interest rates. Do you think this is going to accelerate what's coming? And
if we keep letting them do that, it will. It always happens. The war is part of our life, and guess what? Russian people didn't start the war. They didn't want to do that.
Of course.
But there are governments to whom we give power, and that's what happens. And again, I want to blame one single person, which we all do, for all that. But at the same time, there will be another person that will do that as well. And as long as we keep giving so much power to a single person or a single entity or a group of people, it will keep happening, because they don't think about you. They're just drafting 300,000 civilians in my home country who do not want this war.
Well, they're trying to fight back, aren't they, and trying to get away from the whole thing. I just can't imagine how awful that must be, to be forced to fight in a war that you don't believe in.
Exactly. There is no chances of coming back, because you won't be able to protect yourself if you don't know for what you're killing other people. And just thinking about those people in this position is disgusting.
How do you see Bitcoin playing out? What's next for Bitcoin? Because at the moment, we must remember that Bitcoin's 13 years old, and I've been a big fan of the technology from inception, and prior to Bitcoin, DigiCash, and the whole history of cryptographic technology. But a lot of people were saying 13, 12, 10, 5, 8 years ago and 2 weeks ago that Bitcoin is going to be the money of the world, and it's going to solve all this and that and the other. And what I've studied and understand about Bitcoin and what people are telling me, it doesn't seem to match. I can't see how Bitcoin can solve some of the problems that people are claiming it will. And 13 years later, I'm still waiting for it to happen, as a lot of people are. Why do you think it is that Bitcoin isn't more mainstream? And do you think it ever can be?
Yeah. So as we all study what are the threats for Bitcoin out there. And the biggest threat to Bitcoin out there is government actually become responsible with their money. I don't remember who said that. I think it was Saifedean. Because if governments are good about the issuance of money, about taxing people, then we don't really need Bitcoin. So Bitcoin comes in when there is a need for it, when there is...
So it's an antidote to an illness.
Yeah, exactly. Once they try to seize your funds, this is when you need Bitcoin, because this is the money outside of government control. Once you're getting kicked out of the world financial network, like all the Russian people got kicked out of, this is when you need Bitcoin. When you need to flee your country with your money, this is when you need Bitcoin. So the whole world have been just an amazing marketing campaign for Bitcoin in the last 2 years. We have this crazy war taking place now. Again, we're just giving money to government instead of saving them. So they have monopoly on violence and access to all the money to fund their wars, to fund the violence.
Or just print more.
Exactly. And, or let's say those countries who closed the borders during COVID, if you wanted to leave, you couldn't. You needed a second passport to do that. And if you wanted to leave with your funds, you would need Bitcoin. So again, what's happening in the world is just, it's gonna accelerate the adoption just because people now have a need for it. And the inflation, like this is crazy. Bitcoin can be printed at this rate as US dollar is doing right now.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do that. And you've seen in Europe, the currency collapsing compared to other currencies. Like this is disgusting. This is a geopolitical game applied to people's savings. This is not okay. So you need to get outside of government control and their controlled currencies, and this is where Bitcoin comes into play.
Okay, I've got two questions that I've been asking everybody that I interview, and I was just chatting to Mark Friedrich, who's he's one of the other speakers. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's fantastic, and I highly recommend you check him out. He's an economic expert. So I'll ask you the same two questions. I think the first one's going to stump you, but we'll see. Maybe
I'm not an economic expert.
No, fair. But you understand Bitcoin, and you're a Bitcoin max, and it's a Bitcoin-related question. I've been considering everything that we all consider about Bitcoin, about being outside of government control and so on and so forth, and we all agree that the government practically can't ban Bitcoin. But my rebuttal to that, trying to look at it from all angles in order to protect other people, educate people, and protect myself and my own wealth and so on, is that the American government, for example, doesn't need to ban Bitcoin. All the American government has to do is control all the miners. If the American government is incredibly powerful. People poo-poo the American government and this, that, and the other, but the money that they spend just on military defense is more than the next 19 allies put together. If they concentrated that sort of effort and power into mining Bitcoin, they'd have more than 51% of the hashing power. Do you agree with that or disagree? And if you do agree, how can we stop that? My biggest concern with Bitcoin is that it's not about banning Bitcoin, it's not about stopping people from transacting because they can't. But one of Bitcoin's biggest assets is also its liability. And that is that it's decentralized and anyone can be mining and nobody knows who it is. Yep. That includes the American government. So all the American government got to do tomorrow is build a factory and start making miners and make enough miners to have 51% of the hashing power.
Well, the good thing about it is the game theory of this have been figured out by Satoshi at the very beginning through difficulty adjustment algorithm.
Yeah.
Basically, let's say we now have 100% of, let's say there is no government mining Bitcoin. Okay. So the 100% of mining belongs to people.
Okay.
Now, American government decided to start mining. So what they need for it is buy ASICs or produce ASICs.
Yes.
With them, they must produce chips. So for that, they need more metal, specific metal, to produce those chips. So the price of all this supply, like all the equipment for that, is going to skyrocket because of supply-demand inequality. So now they have to spend more and more money in order to get those ASICs, and they will have to compete with the rest of the world for that, which is a lot to compete with. Then once they join the network, 51% is not enough to actually break Bitcoin. They will have to actually monopolize the whole thing, which again, the more ASICs join the network, the more difficulty adjusts, and it's going to be harder and harder to mine more Bitcoin. So they're going to make it more and more hard for themselves too. Mm-hmm. So the whole game theory of this, and I'm sure there will be people who explain it much better.
No, you're doing a great job.
But it just takes care of it.
So I come back to you on that point, and I would say that F2 Pool, which is one of the largest, the Chinese-based company, one of the largest Bitcoin pools in the world, they control 18% of the hashing power on Bitcoin. And the American government is 100 million times more powerful. And I agree with what you're saying, that the more and more they try to corner the market, the more expensive things will become. But it won't be insurmountable. They will be able to purchase enough ASICs or create them in order to control Bitcoin. And my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you have, nodes aside for 1 second, if you have over 51% of the hashing power, you can decide which transactions go in which order. And by doing so, it's over.
Not exactly.
Okay.
As a miner, 51% is enough to have the majority of mining.
Yes.
And you can, but you really won't be able to roll back more than one block, again, because of the game theory of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's say they mine most of the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And let's say they print so much money to build this whole thing, which will skyrocket inflation again, make the assets even more expensive, and it's like gonna be a loop. But like they will have so much expenses in order to build that, and in order to keep mining with electricity that we now have a whole another talk about electricity in the world.
Yeah.
I really don't see it happening. I don't see the possibility of it. And again, with 51% attack, they won't be able to control all the transaction of Bitcoin at all.
No, I completely agree with that, but they wouldn't need to, because they're just looking to collapse Bitcoin. If they wanted to break Bitcoin and collapse it, all they've got to do is take control of the thing, and then the whole thing becomes...
51% is not enough for that.
It doesn't have to be, because I think if it was 51%, then generally I think, because of the ethos and all the things that we've discussed...
You can like roll back 1 or 2 blocks with 51%.
It's not even about rolling back, it's moving forward. If all of the people in this conference, if I went on the stage now and said, hi guys, as of this morning, the American government controls 51% of the hashing power, I think they'd all start running around screaming and selling as quickly as they possibly could. I don't know, it's just a thought. And it does worry me about Bitcoin, because I think people underestimate the power of the American government, and also how keen they are. They underestimate the power of the American government, and other governments, and they also underestimate how power hungry countries are and how desperate they are to hold on to that power. So the incentive is there, the motive is there, and I think they have the means to do it. So that to me is the biggest risk to Bitcoin, is that the American government just centralize it.
Bitcoin is like, let's say Bitcoin is 1% of their worry, because there are so many attacks on government that can happen outside of Bitcoin that again will take their power away. So if they were to put all their resources and actual education into that, I don't see that happening still. But
just an interesting thought.
But I agree that American government has way too much power, way too much influence on the rest of the world. It's just absolutely insane.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. It's now the year 2032. How much is 1 Bitcoin?
10 years from now. 2.7 mil.
2.7 mil. Okay. Mark said somewhere between 1 and 7 mil. So you're right in about the same sort of theory. So 2.7 mil or 0 or 2.7 million?
2.7 mil.
Dollars.
Yeah.
Katie, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, and I like this prediction. Let's see how that goes. I'm now going to hold on to
That's
that.
now on record.
In 2032.
Yeah, 2032.
I barely do any Bitcoin price prediction.
We're going to set a reminder.
Yep.
Thanks ever so much for watching, guys. I hope you found that interesting. Katie's been an absolute pleasure to talk to. As always, I'll put the links in the description below to Katie's website, so you can have a look and check out the multi-passport option and to protect yourself from your government if that's something that interests you. As always, thanks ever so much for watching. I'll see you soon.